Okay, this second identification is actually going to be three-part one. You can combine them. It's the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. And all of these occurred actually, not really, it's a little before the time we're covering in this class, but it's essential to know something about these things. It relates to the entire rest of the semester and the expansion of rights and the expansion of freedom and the expansions of voting rights and all of the things that came from that era and how importantly it was influenced in the expansion of the rights of all people throughout U.S. history, which is really a theme of history in the class. So these are three: Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. So you're going to write a little bit on each of them, still about six, maybe or seven sentences on this one. You may have had some notes already from when we went over this earlier in the meeting room, in the GoToMeeting room. Okay. Okay, so the first part of the idea is time-wise. When is the Declaration of Independence? You write the Declaration of Independence was written on July 4th, 1776. And it was written by what's called the Founding Fathers or the framers of the Constitution. The Founding Framers, or however you want to write it. There's been some changes in how that's said. And so the framers or the founders is fine. So, and that's in Declaration of Independence, which was written to break off from England and start a free country. But also, hugely important for this class is the philosophy that was written in the Declaration. Okay, so here we see that the philosophy of the Declaration of Independence is really the philosophy of the United States of America, even to this day. And you see here, this is something also known as natural law. We see we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence. So a very important sentence in that document. And it was influenced by many other philosophers before that. One of them, and just one of them, is John Locke, who had written previously, all mankind being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possession. So he was a well-known philosopher. Okay, and we see here the Declaration, which is really about a philosophy of natural rights. So we see the Declaration of Natural Rights, also known as natural law. And the second part of the Declaration of Independence lists these rights of the citizens and explains that in the Republic, the government is there to protect the rights of the people. Thomas Jefferson called these rights unalienable rights, meaning they can never be taken away. But it's very much a part of the natural law tradition. And the natural law tradition isn't one thing. It isn't certainly not just like the Enlightenment or one philosophical stand. It's an entire world history that it draws upon. Like this says, the traditions of natural law and natural rights go all the way back to the ancient Greek with Plato and Aristotle, famous religious holy men, Aquinas and Augustine. And the traditions suggest that that there's an unchanging or universal belief that protects all people, like an abstract, a higher belief, not given to people by kings or queens or men or anyone. It's a higher universal law. It's certainly the Catholic Church has talked of natural law a lot in its history. All Christian churches have talked about it in some way. The Quakers, and they focus on the idea of universal principles of morality, and that a life lived in accord with these principles is better than one lived in opposition to it. So that is permeating American philosophical thought. It's called natural law. And so the second part of this idea was the U.S. Constitution, and the date for that is 1789. And that's the formal constitution or government details of the founding of America. So that is like 13 years after the Declaration of Independence, in which a blueprint was written up that is still used today, very much so, in 3 articles of the Constitution. I taught American national government like 10 years ago here at St. Augustine, but to do that, we could cover this stuff here, just the Constitution, in an entire semester we could cover this. But as a history class, so we'll just cover the main point. So you see the first words are "we the people." So this right away says it's not the king, it's not the queen, it's not the dictator, it's we the people are the important people under this philosophy. And so that document was written up, and that document has the presidency as part of it, creation of the presidency, the creation of Congress, which makes laws, and then the creation of the court system, like the Supreme Court and the court system, called the judiciary. And some of you, I think, have quite a bit of knowledge about that, and some don't. So, but that's the founding document, how the country's run. But they also left a way to change things, even though it's a permanent document. They created a way to change the Declaration of Independence and create something called amendments. So through a very complicated process, an amendment can come along and change the Constitution, which changed something that was originally written. And it's very important. It's happened many times. Once this tedious process goes through, you can change parts of the Constitution. And the first 10 changes or amendments are called the Bill of Rights, and they were all done the same year. So the Bill of Rights are the first 10 changes to the Constitution, and those changes were immense. And they were the first 10. Some of the things in these amendments that were not in the original Constitution, because the original Constitution was not perfect and needed to be changed in this formal way. And one gave the freedom of the press, in Amendment 1, freedom of religion, whatever religion that you want to practice, you're allowed to have. A king or a queen can't tell you what religion to worship. The freedom of the press. Other parts of these amendments are the freedom of to a jury trial. Instead of being tried judged by one judge, you have a right to 12 jurors of regular people like you are, and then those people would judge you in a criminal or a lawsuit. Freedom of the press is another huge one that came out, kind of the hallmarks of what democracy is. Freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of jury trials, freedom of protest, to peacefully protest. Obviously, that's the key, peacefully protest. And these freedoms have been used throughout history. Martin Luther King used the freedom to protest. Cesar Chavez, a big thing for him was the Bill of Rights. They brought up the Bill of Rights. He brought up the Bill of Rights many times. So throughout American history, the Bill of Rights has been talked about in these freedoms. Okay, so that'll wrap up this one on the Bill of Rights. So for your IDs then, the Declaration of Independence was written on July 4th, 1776. And the U.S. Constitution was written on 1789, our government, that's our government. And then the Bill of Rights was written in 1791, which were these first major changes such as freedom of religion and freedom of the press. And so that made a structure for the entire history of the United States forward, um, and really defined the country even to this day. And even now there's been many new amendments. Those were the first 10 Bill of Rights, but then you had future amendments that would later come. Um, like the 13th Amendment, which finally came along that ended slavery, and other amendments as time goes by. So, but it began here with the Bill of Rights. Okay, so just write that up, 4 to 7 sentences. Write it down from your notes from when we have the live class, or while you're looking, and when you're looking at this video. And remember, make sure to use notes from our discussions and lecture to get full credit. You have enough in here. You don't need to go and just randomly pick up stuff on the internet. I think if you need to look up a date or something, that's fine. But hopefully, you can find that in your notes and then turn that in by email, or if you can bring it to you, somehow get it to me on Canvas. Okay. Now we'll go to the third ID.